Justin, hey, congratulations for Apache Junction.
Hey, thanks, man.
I guess let's start off with the easy question. Where did the original idea came from for coming up with this Western?
For this particular movie?
Yes.
Ever since I started, so it's actually quite a story. So when I first started doing my first movie, which was a Western, I sat down with this executive producer who I tracked down on LinkedIn and asked, and he'd done a big Western as an executive producer. And I said, hey, could you find some time to maybe give some stupid young filmmaker, a lunch? And I didn't know what I was doing, And miraculously, this guy goes, sure, meet me in, it was like Marina Del Rey at some place. And I was like, oh, okay. So, I stay up the entire night before I write questions down. I show up and we have this meeting. And the two things, when I told him I was going to go do a Western, I wrote a Western. The two things he told me is, one, no Western can be made for under $10 million that's worth its salt. And two, females in Westerns do not sell, so do not bother putting them in as any kind of main character. I kind of took that and I said, well, I'm just going to kind of take your advice and throw it out the front door. And so my first film, I did have a female as the co-lead. I did do a Western for literally a fraction of a percentage of a $10 million budget. And, that carried forth to today, X amount of movies later, where I still make Westerns and write for some strong female characters. And lo and behold, guess what? They do get distributed. So that's where this came to be, because I wanted to tell a story from a very innocent woman's perspective who wants to make a name for herself, right? And that's just where that came about. I was like, well, a great story to tell would be from a reporter coming from a big city who goes to like this lawless land. That was very intriguing to me, and that's how that came out. That's how that came to be.
Obviously, this, like you said, this is not your first Western, and you keep on coming back to this genre. Why do you love this genre so much?
My grandfather, my grandpa had, whether it was a John Wayne film, a Clint Eastwood movie, or F Troop on Nick at Night, something was on with Westerns. I mean, Bonanza, it didn't matter what it was. It was always around in my childhood, and there was something on. And what's crazy is it was always on. So I think in my subconscious, it kind of clicked in, because I never watched Westerns a lot until later in my life. And then when it came time to make my first movie, I wanted to make a Western. And partly because my grandpa was my best friend, my hero. I mean, he was everything to me. And that kind of made me go down this journey. And I made the first one, and then some distributors like, we want another Western, and then it was another Western, and then all of a sudden I've been asked for a Western at least once a year. I mean, that's kind of I think there's also probably a different style of that, like the B movie kind of Western of like, if you go back into the 60s and 70s and even the 80s, we had all of these spaghetti Westerns, which you don't have anymore. And I think I have a lot of that's a lot of influence in a lot of my particular films. So there's a kind of a style there, I think, that you don't see in a lot of Westerns now. And you get gritty, big budgeted Westerns like Hostels and the 310 to Yuma remake and those kinds of things. But I have that spaghetti flair in my movies that I feel isn't there anymore. And I that's important, because that's kind of the groundwork of what was before us to get us. It's kind of an homage to that time frame.
Now, what's fascinating about your film is that you had every single Western element. You had the environment, you had the traditional saloon fist fight, you had the town shootout, you even had a one-on-one confrontation gunfight at the end. But of course, these are like, traditional things that are in all Westerns. Do you ever feel under pressure to, do something different, or do you believe like the same formula works time and time again?
Again, I think it goes back to kind of paying homage to the old movies that I watched or I saw growing up and things like that. Oh wow, this is such a I feel like there's a lot of politics involved in this answering this question. I think a lot of people in film worry too much. I'm gonna get so in trouble for saying this. They worry too much about constantly trying to reinvent the wheel, constantly trying to find something new. I don't necessarily, that's not something that rides on my back. I am 100% okay with telling tales of outlaws that might seem like, hey, they checked off all the boxes, but I have a blast making those kinds of things, and I still think you have different characters that get implemented in that people want to watch. There's a reason why you made 50 years of westerns, and they were being cranked out, 20 westerns a month or something like that for 30 plus years. So I don't necessarily, I know that every time I have one come out, the critics, some critics, half the critics and half the reviews will say, well, all the boxes got checked off here for, this is a classic Western, but nothing new got brought to the table. That's definitely been a review now and again. Hey, to be honest, I wear that as a badge of honor. Like I love paying homage to those old kind of movies, because they're not, like I said, they're not really being made anymore like that.
Mm-hmm. And the title of your film is called Apache Junction. And when I was actually, heard of the film and watching it, I thought Apache Junction was an actual location, and it is an actual location.
Right.
Why did you decide to basically, choose Apache Junction, which is a real, it's a real Western town, rather than just completely create a fictional one?
Well, that was an area of contention between the Army and the Apache, and it was lawless, and there was a lot of silver and gold mines in the area and stuff. Now, the name Apache Junction didn't get officially designated to that particular town till, like, I think 29. It was in the 20s. I think it was 29. But that name floated around in for quite a while prior to that. I'm trying to remember the name of the exact mine it was. There was like the McNaughton mine or something like that. But I just chose Apache Junction because it's a great, when you think of that, it's kind of like, well, this is the crossroads of where several places come together out in the middle of nowhere. And hey, we got this real threat of the Apache tribe that's that's fighting the Army, and the Army's trying to wipe out a ton of Native Americans because they just wanted the land. I mean, it was a crazy thing. I think that's why I went with it. I've driven through it. I've been to that place, and I've been to I tend to travel around and go to a lot of places where classic shootouts happen. And because I love that era. But yeah, it had no bearing of really of historical relevance in terms of Apache Junction. I wanted to call it that for the sake of, that was the junction of kind of where all this stuff comes together.
Absolutely. Tell us about the production set that you actually have to choose. Obviously, it wasn't filmed at Apache Junction in Arizona or Arizona. It's filmed what, in New Mexico? Am I correct?
Filmed it in New Mexico and filmed it in California. So yeah, we had a very classic set in New Mexico, and they've shot the Ballad of Buster Scruggs and Silverado. I mean, tons of classic films were filmed on that set, and that's where we shot. And we shot there for like 2.5 weeks, and then COVID shut New Mexico down, and we had to shut down for a while, and we came back and filmed the rest of it in a small ranch about 2 hours outside Los Angeles last December. And again, a very turbulent time frame when COVID was exploding more than it ever had in LA. So it was kind of a crazy time to go back and start making that movie again, knowing we broke at the start of it, and then we came back to film it at the worst of it, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. And we did it. We got through it, and it wasn't without its trials and tribulations, man. I can tell you that. It was trying to make things work and jumping hurdles, having days cut. I mean, all kinds of stuff, which is what you deal with as a filmmaker. And it gets very frustrating and it's very daunting. And there's so many sleepless nights, and you know, it ain't easy.
Besides COVID, is filming westerns a challenge anymore? I mean, like we said, this isn't your first rodeo.
Oh, you ask? Is that like personally?
Personally for you? Yeah.
I not like. I mean, I don't. I'm gonna stick my foot in my mouth again here. No. I look at westerns probably as much as Steven Spielberg might look at shooting World War II stuff. I mean, he shot 2 series and Saving Private Ryan, right? I look at westerns and I'm like, I did so much research when I first set out to do my first western years ago. I know every set, every town, every nook and cranny, every ghost town. I know people that have horses. I know kind of everything. And in terms of the production for western stuff, and so it's not that hard to me to get. I just shot another western this summer, and I had like a week and a half of prep. Put it on its feet. We went and we shot it and knocked it out. And they're not. I don't want to say they're not hard, because they're extremely hard. I think once you kind of get in at least the production side, where you know where to go to get everything you need, that makes it a lot easier.
Wow, that is great. Well, let's not forget that you attract a wonderful cast people for your films. Could you talk about the ensemble that you managed to put together? You had Thomas Jane, Scout Taylor-Compton, Victoria Pratt, Stuart Townsend, and you even got Trace Adkins to support you as the Union soldier here.
Yeah, I'd worked with Trace. Trace came in on my movie Badland for a day and was absolutely phenomenal. I'd seen Trace prior to that, and I kept telling myself in my head, listen, I wanted to work with Trace more. I want to work with Trace more. Like, I saw a lot of talent in Trace. So it was amazing to get to work on this and have him in a much larger role. And then I just shot outside of the Western. I shot this summer. I shot another movie in Hawaii, which he's the lead in, and I worked with him for a few weeks. It was great. I love that guy. He's a good friend, and I think he's an amazing, talented individual. Tom Jane was an absolute treat to work with. I mean, I grew up watching him and stuff, and then getting to work with him. He brought his own flavor to that character, and the pipe. I go back to the pipe all the time. He brought that pipe and said, "What do you think of this pipe, Justin? It's great," and then chewed on it in every scene. And my producer Damon Hillen brought, like I said, what do you think of Scout Taylor-Compton for Annabelle Angel? I was a fan of her work. I love Rob Zombie's first Halloween film, so I was like, it would be really, really cool to get her out of horror, and put her in something that you don't normally see Scout in. She was a joy to work with. And then Stuart, I mean, man, I've been a fan of Stuart's too for a long time, and I hadn't seen anything from him in a while. And I remember the day that my costume designer Samantha fitted him. She sent me a photo, and it like when you have a hero in a Western, there's a particular moment when you see an outfit and they put the perfect hat on. That as a director, you get really giddy because you're like, that's the character. And I got sent a photo, and Stu was in this hat with this outfit, and I go, that's Jericho Ford. And I got so excited. And then when we got on set, Stuart had such a affinity and a passion for that character, and it made it such a joy to work with him. He's so talented, so talented. I did have a great cast on this. It was really a treat. I can't speak more highly of Ed Marone as Oslo Pike, who's the real villain of the movie, because he brought something completely, again, like Tom Jane did. He brought something completely unique to the character of Oslo Pike that I didn't expect. And he creeped out everyone on set, and people. Trace was legitimately. They had that scene together. They have a scene together in the movie in his office, and like Trace was legitimately afraid of Ed. It was awesome. So, yeah, man, it was great. I had a great cast, and they were all wonderful to work with.
It's speaking of Tom Jane again, because every time I see him, he's always barefoot. He didn't walk around barefoot on set, or did he actually like put on cowboy boots or not or something?
No, he had shoes on. I never saw it. I never saw Tom with that. However, not that he's such a method actor where he's in character all the time, but he never not had the pipe with. He had that pipe with him every minute of every day. Like, you turn around and he's sitting there watching his scene with you, and he's got the pipe hanging out of his mouth. It was awesome.
That is awesome. Well, Justin, let me wrap it up with one more question, because you do so many of these Western movies, and obviously, you bring in a brand new cast and all. Do you usually keep the same stunt team, or do you try to work with the different stunt teams every time you go on a project?
No, I've worked with kind of a different stunt crew most of these movies. It's hard pressed when you do make a Western with actors, because most actors want to make a Western. A lot of actors haven't ever had that opportunity. They want to do their own stunts. Like, they'll fight you tooth and nail to do their own stunts. And I'd say 90% of the time, our actors are doing their own stunts.
Wow, that is great. Well, hey, Justin, hey, congratulations once again for Apache Junction. And thank you for talking to us about your film. It's wonderful. Keep on making Westerns. That's a thing you do well, and that's the thing you love.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.